Hi, I'm Kevin Fortunato. Thank you for watching this video. I decided to make this video as a reference for my students. Sometimes they're home practicing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with no bathroom breaks, and they forget what it is that I've asked them to practice, or they can't figure it out, or whatever. So I thought that I would put this video together, and they would have a reference point that they can just go online and pop it in, and there it is, and they can check out what it is that I'm asking them to practice. If you're not my student, I hope you can find value in this, and thanks for watching. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a couple of patterns from two different books, and we're going to vary those patterns as much as we possibly can. We're going to show you all kinds of options that you can do to spice up your grooves or your patterns, and we'll take it one step at a time. So the first book we're going to use is John Pickering's book called The Drummer's Cookbook. And right on page 14 is the first groove. It's the first example. And we're going to do that in its basic setup just as it's written, and then we're going to vary it as much as we can. And then we're going to do the same thing with Gary Chafee's book called Technique Patterns. And right on page 57, we're going to use the very first example from that as well. And that's a snare drum exercise. And I'll show you how to vary it as much as we possibly can. So we're going to start with John Pickering's book, page 14, number 1. This is the groove, and we're going to play this exact groove many different ways. Here's how it goes. So the next thing that I usually have students do is apply open hi-hat notes to these patterns. The first open hi-hat note, the obvious place to put it would be on the upbeat. So you'd put your open hi-hat on all the and notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you would still keep the bass drum and snare drum stuff as written. And it would sound like this. The next variation that I would have you do is put your open hi-hat on the downbeats. So it'll be on beat 1, 2, 3, and 4 instead of on the upbeats. And that groove, if you play it, would sound like this. After you're done doing all of the upbeat eighth notes and downbeat eighth note open hi-hats, you would then start to shift over to playing 3-note groupings on the hi-hat. So here's a couple of them that really work well. One is playing your hi-hat on 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. So if you play that, you'd have this pattern. And if you added the rest of the kit to it, it sounds like this. Another pattern that works really well is to put your hi-hats on 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. And if you do that, it would sound like this. If you wanted to apply the open hi-hat notes to these as well, you can. A good open hi-hat note pattern for the 1 E and is on the and. And it's pretty obvious it would sound like this. And if you apply the bass drum and snare drum, you have. And if you wanted to put an open hi-hat note on the other pattern, the 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a pattern, you would probably put it on beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it would sound like this. One-note patterns work really well too. So where you used to have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or the 3-note patterns, now you could do something like just beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. A really cool way to make it sound a little funkier is to actually put the one note hi-hat on the E note. So just E. It would sound like this. So you could also move your notes over to the ride cymbal. I mean, all of the stuff that we just played here works really well on the ride cymbal, and if you wanted to, that would allow you to layer it a little bit because you can step the hi-hat. So I'll just play the 3-note grouping on the ride cymbal, and I'll step my hi-hat on quarter notes, and that would be like this. Any one of the 3-note groupings, 2-note groupings, or 1-note groupings work, and you can also step your step your hi-hat on the upbeat instead of on the downbeats. So a lot of people don't realize that you can go and play all of these with 16th notes. In the book itself, it tells you to play them with straight 16th notes with one hand. And if you did that, you would have this. It's a great pattern. It sounds really good, but you can only go so fast with this. So one of the better things to do is actually break it up between two hands. If you do that, you'll have to bring your left hand off of the hi-hat to play any of the E or A notes, and your right hand will play any of the one or and notes on the snare drum, and it'll sound and look like this. If you move that over to the ride cymbal, it's kind of cooler because you have two different sounding ride cymbals, and it could sound like this. Again, I mean, these are all just patterns that could help enhance your playing. And in fact, you don't have to use John Pickering's book. You can just get any pattern. You can make that pattern up on your own and then apply these concepts of open hi-hat, 3-note groupings, 1-note groupings, breaking it up between the 16th notes, etc., etc. Another thing that you could do is change the groove to 7/8. So if you're playing the groove in 4/4, you just need to lop off the last two 16th notes, and you've now created a pattern in 7/8. So what used to be this, by leaving out the last, you now have 7/8, and it sounds like this. You can also apply the open hi-hat note theory to this, the 3-note grouping theory to this, the ride cymbal pattern to this, and the 16th note broken up pattern to all these 7/8 variations. If you applied the open hi-hat, though, it'll be on the upbeat on the first measure and on the downbeat on the second measure because it's an uneven number. It's 7/8. So what you would have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it'll sound like this. One of the things you could do is apply this 3-note grouping pattern to the 7/8 variations. And if you did that, you would have 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7. And it would sound like this. The open hi-hat theory applies to that as well. The open hi-hat would be on 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 5. And it would sound like this. So one of the things was I decided to start playing these as reggae patterns. Instead of playing the bass drum where it was written, I decided to play the cross stick in the bass drum spot and the bass drum in the snare drum spot, thus flipping them around. Reggae usually feels a little bit backwards, so the reggae pattern really works if you move things into the backwards position. What used to be the bass drum is now rim click, vice versa. So it used to be this. But now I'm going to switch it over and it's going to have this pattern. And finally, I want to introduce to you incidentals. And incidentals, I mean, you would sort of buzz a note, or you would move notes over to tom-toms. So if you had this pattern, by buzzing certain snare drum notes or moving notes over to tom-toms, you could create these patterns. And that concludes John Pickering's book, The Drummer's Cookbook, Groove Number 1 from page 14 and all its variations.